Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Thursday, August 17, 2023. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas announces new construction at the department's headquarters in Washington designed to consolidate operations. Republican Congressman Chip Roy threatens to cut Homeland Security funding if the U.S. Mexico border security situation is not improved. Democratic Senator Ben Cardin, chair of the Small Business Committee, talks about how his committee can help rebuild on the Hawaiian island of Maui after the devastating wildfires. State Department asked about Secretary Antony Blinken's reported phone call with Paul Whelan, an American serving a long prison sentence in Russia. Unjustly, the U.S. government says. United Nations Security Council holds its first meeting on human rights in North Korea in 6 years, as President Joe Biden goes to Camp David in Maryland for a trilateral meeting on Friday with the leaders of South Korea and Japan. But first, President Biden makes a stop in Scranton, Pennsylvania to pay respects to a close friend who died last week, Ellen Casey, mother of U.S. Senator Bob Casey. And we start with the announcement of $288 million from the Inflation Reduction Act to consolidate Department of Homeland Security operations at the St. Elizabeth's campus in Washington, D.C. The General Services Administration Administrator, Robin Carnahan, saying at today's news conference that the money will go towards building new headquarters for CISA, the Cybersecurity and Information Security Agency, ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, and also a new parking garage and entry gate and security checkpoint for the entire campus. The Homeland Security Secretary, Alejandro Mayorkas, spoke about why he believes the money will be well spent.
20 years ago, St. Elizabeth's was a boarded-up hospital, and DHS was assembling chairs and desks in front of elevators, drafting plans and organization charts, and striving for a seat at the table from our temporary Nebraska Avenue complex. Since then, thanks to the more than $3.2 billion appropriated by Congress so far, we broke ground on our St. Elizabeth's headquarters in 2009. Our state-of-the-art Coast Guard headquarters opened in 2013. Center building renovation began in 2015, and headquarters staff moved in April 2019. Many of our components remain dispersed across the greater Washington area. Some might ask the question, why is that a problem? To them, I offer two reasons why consolidation is important to our department's mission. The first is fiscal, as Administrator Carnahan referenced. As public servants, we have a responsibility to the public to make smart, careful use of their money. GSA, DHS, and the entire Biden-Harris administration are doing just that. Full execution of the DHS campus consolidation effort will take our total number of locations from 40 to 6. This will reduce the DHS footprint by over 1.2 million square feet. That is 27.5 acres of land, or the equivalent of 21 football fields of space. Doing so will save the taxpayers tens of millions of dollars annually. The second reason is operational. Bringing the DHS, CISA, and ICE together under one roof at St. Elizabeth's will increase departmental mission cohesion and streamline inter- and intra-component collaboration, which helps make us stronger and better positioned to mitigate the new and evolving threats America faces. When completed, these new projects alone will house 6,500 DHS personnel, more than doubling the current number of DHS employees who work at St. Elizabeth's. That is more than 80% of the 14,800 employees who will eventually work here at full development. This is a win for the DHS workforce, for the Capital Region, and for our Homeland Security.
The Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas at today's announcement at the department headquarters in Washington, D.C. Also there, Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, Democrat from the District of Columbia, who talked about the benefits to the local economy.
Through local hiring, we can ensure that federal dollars for infrastructure projects flow through to local communities and provide meaningful, good-paying jobs in construction to D.C. residents. The consolidation of the DHS headquarters at St. Elizabeth's epitomizes the potential to leverage federal projects for the benefit of the nation and D.C. residents. I will continue to support big, bold projects like this that can transform communities.
Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, the delegate from the District of Columbia, a Democrat, at today's news conference at the headquarters in Washington. The St. Elizabeth's campus, which was named for the former government-run hospital for the insane that stood on that site. The GSA says that groundbreaking for the new construction will begin in 2024. A story from Fox News: Congressman Chip Roy, Republican from Texas, on Wednesday erupted during an interview and called for Congress to reject further funding for that smirking son of a bee, Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Congressman Roy, a border and deficit hawk, told KSEV radio host Chris Salcedo that Republicans in the House must withhold funding from the Department of Homeland Security until the crisis at the southern border is resolved. His heated remarks come after House Speaker Kevin McCarthy floated a short-term continuing resolution to extend Congress's September 30th deadline to fund the government. This is from the Fox News article. It continues, Speaker McCarthy's proposal is largely considered a non-starter for Congressman Roy and other conservative House Freedom Caucus members who want Congress to cut back spending to pre-coronavirus pandemic levels. Here is Congressman Roy on that radio station.
To have anybody in the left in this administration trying to defend the current state of affairs at the border is a slap in the face to the little girl sitting in a stash house in Fort Worth, Texas right now getting raped because of their policies, purposely using that little girl as a political pawn, because that's the truth, right? And you say, well, Chip, isn't that just the, Hollywood kind of fictionalized account in the, Sound of Freedom? First of all, Sound of Freedom was based on a true story. I mean, fictionalized probably around the margins, as you do with all movies like that. But what is not something that was made into a movie is the opinion that was released by Reed O'Connor, a federal judge in Fort Worth just a couple of months ago, basically where he had to upward depart from the guidelines because the Department of Justice wasn't asking for enough penalty for the individuals involved who are employed by cartels who were holding for ransom a little girl and her mother, sending a message to a guy who came here illegally, yes, who was in Baltimore, who was being told, you will give us $23,000 or we're going to rape your little girl. That's happening right now. And all of these NGOs, all these Catholic charities, all of these so-called Christian groups patting themselves on the back, and all these leftists for how great they are. You own that. And we as a people, as a country, should stop it. And we as a Republican Congress should put our entire careers and our entire ownership of the House of Representatives on the line to stop funding that smirking son of a bitch, Alejandro Mayorkas, who is the Secretary of Homeland Security and shouldn't be. Not only should he be impeached, the entire organization should have funding withheld until we stop what's happening at the border. And until these gutless losers in Washington recognize that we're supposed to use the power of the purse to stop it, we're not going to get change.
Congressman Chip Roy, Republican from Texas, on KSEV Radio in Houston on Wednesday. An article at Spectrum One News following a report earlier in August that the Texas Department of Public Safety troopers are separating migrant fathers from their families at the Texas-Mexico border. Congressman Joaquin Castro, Democrat from Texas, and his fellow Hispanic Democrats are calling for the Biden administration to investigate. The Congressional Hispanic Caucus on Tuesday delivered a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland and Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, asking them to immediately launch an investigation and take concerted measures to ensure that officials from the Texas Department of Public Safety stop intentionally separating migrant families along the Rio Grande sector of the U.S. Mexico border. That's from Spectrum One News. Congressman Castro talked about this Wednesday night on the PBS NewsHour.
Many of us were shocked and outraged when Donald Trump started separating families. Well, Greg Abbott has started to replicate a version of that now in Texas. And there were reports that at least 26 families had been separated. We're asking the Department of Homeland Security and Department of Justice to make sure that there's no federal funding that's going towards family separation or towards any of these other activities that may violate human, civil, or legal rights of people.
Congressman Joaquin Castro, Democrat from Texas, part of an interview on the PBS NewsHour Wednesday night. This is Washington Today. Now to the response to the wildfires on the Hawaiian island of Maui. As of Wednesday night, officials there say that 111 people have been confirmed dead, but only about a third of the burned out area in the city of Lahaina has been searched. With the federal agencies FEMA, Homeland Security Department, Health and Human Services Department on the ground doing recovery and aiding those in immediate need, some others are starting to think about the rebuilding process, as there are thousands of homes and office buildings and the city infrastructure completely destroyed. Senator Ben Cardin, Democrat from Maryland, chair of the Small Business Committee, brought this up at the start of a field hearing in Berlin, Maryland.
I want to also just point out this hearing is mainly to focus on the challenges we have in rural areas. We recognize that rural areas have additional challenges. We've seen that over and over again. We've seen the challenges that occur from COVID-19. We've had challenges in regards to natural disasters that make it much more challenging for small businesses. So we know that we have to pay attention to those issues. I think all of us today, our hearts and prayers go out to the people of Hawaii and Maui for the tragedy that occurred there. It's unspeakable, the loss of life. I know my colleague, Congressman Senator Arono, is holding a hearing tomorrow in Honolulu. I'm sure it's going to deal with those issues. Our committee will do everything we possibly can, working with the Biden administration, to provide all the help we possibly can to the people of Hawaii. It's unspeakable, the loss of life. Those of us who have been to the town that was destroyed know what a special place that was. It was special like Berlin because of the small business operators that were in Lahaina. So now they're going to have to rebuild. We want them to rebuild. It's going to be very, very difficult. They don't have the deep pockets that large companies have. And they need our partnership. They need our governmental partnership. So we recognize that we have special responsibilities as a government partner. The communities of small businesses have rebounded from these tragedies in the past. In this region alone, you had historically the peach plight. You've had hurricanes Hazel and Irene. You've had tornadoes and flooding. You had COVID. And the businesses are here. The small businesses have shown resiliency, but we know we have to do more in order to help in regards to resiliency.
Senator Ben Cardin, Democrat from Maryland, chair of the Small Business Committee, at a field hearing today in his state. A page at PolitiFact reads that some Maui residents displaced by wildfires said that developers are approaching them to buy their properties, leading to concerns among locals about an outsider-led land grab. Hawaii Governor Josh Green addressed those concerns in a recent interview, suggesting that the state could buy some land in the historic city of Lahaina to preserve it and protect it from outside developers. Now, some social media users are presenting a shortened clip of his comments to falsely claim his comments show a state plan to usher in smart cities. Governor Green mentioned neither smart cities nor smart homes in his response. Again, this is from PolitiFact, and it continues. The term smart cities generally refers to cities that use technology to collect data to help them run more efficiently, such as by improving transportation or electric grids. Instituting smart city technologies in a city would not require destroying existing properties or taking them over. The concept has become a common target for conspiracy theorists who falsely claim it's a government plan to track residents or limit their freedom. That from PolitiFact. Governor Green has been taking part in daily news conferences, and on Wednesday, he said that he'll actually seek to prevent outsiders from buying up land in Lahaina.
My intention from start to finish is to make sure that no one is victimized from a land grab, that we do not suffer predation against those who are suffering. So I've instructed the Attorney General to work toward a moratorium on any transactions. There's some legal challenges there. We're going to push right through those and make sure that people don't lose their land here in Hawaii. That is central. I've been speaking to leaders all across our state, and that's important to everyone. What that means is we're going to make sure that there are no transactions that take advantage of our people, and we're going to give you some definitive answers by Friday about how hard I can lock that down. That doesn't mean we don't want people to come and invest in Hawaii and travel to Hawaii away from the impact zone. We'll talk about that in a moment. What it means is people are right now traumatized. Please don't approach them with an offer to buy land. Please don't approach their families to tell them that they're going to be better off if they make a deal, because we're not going to allow it. And then between myself and I'm sure the mayor, we're not going to allow people to get permits. Forgive me for speaking for mayor, but I know he's a tough guy. We're not going to allow people to take advantage. And it's going to be a very significant amount of time anyway in the recovery before building could be done. So don't make the mistake of testing us in that space, please.
Hawaiian Governor Josh Green, a Democrat, at a news conference in Hawaii on Wednesday. Also at that news conference was the head of Maui's Emergency Management Agency, Herman Andaya, who was asked why the emergency sirens on Maui did not go off to alert residents about the wildfires.
Do you regret not sounding the sirens?
I do not. And the reason why... and
so many people said they could have been saved if they had time to escape. Had a siren gone off, they would have known that there was a crisis emerging. And as we know, so many bodies were found in the ground.
Do you want him to give you the answer, or do you want to give? Well, then let him finish. Let him finish his answer.
Sorry, there's a lot of people.
Well, you're talking and you're not letting him talk. If you want to talk, come up here.
I'm ready for the answer.
Then wait.
The sirens, as I had mentioned earlier, is used primarily for tsunamis, and that's the reason why many of them are found, almost all of them are found, on the coastline. The public is trained to seek higher ground in the event that the siren is sounded. In fact, on the website of the Hawaii Emergency Management Agency, the following guideline is provided. If you are in a low-lying area near the coastline, evacuate to high grounds, inland or vertically to the fourth floor and higher of a concrete building. Alerts may also come in the form of a wireless emergency alert. Had we sounded the siren that night, we're afraid that people would have gone Mauka. And if that was the case, then they would have gone into the fire. And so that is the reason why our protocol has been to use WEA and EAS. By the way, I should also note that there are no sirens Mauka, or on the mountainside, where the fire was spreading down. So even if we sounded the siren, it would not have saved those people on the mountainside, Mauka.
Herman Andaya, Maui Emergency Management Agency administrator, at a news conference on Wednesday. And the other voice you heard was the mayor of Maui, Richard Bisson. Hawaii created what it touts as the largest system of outdoor alert sirens in the world after a tsunami back in 1946 that killed more than 150 people. From CNN, asked Wednesday about his earlier statement the sirens were broken, Governor Green told CNN, those sirens have been aging over decades. Some have received maintenance. We are waiting to see what others had available to them, but intermittently, some were broken, and we're doing a full assessment. On Wall Street today, the Dow down 290, NASDAQ down 157, S&P down 33. Washington today continues in a moment.
When citizens are truly informed, our republic thrives. Get informed straight from the source. On C-SPAN. Unfiltered, unbiased, word for word. From the nation's capital to wherever you are. Because the opinion that matters the most is your own. This is what democracy looks like. C-SPAN, powered by cable.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast wherever you find your podcasts and on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. State Department spokesman today getting questions about the news overnight that Secretary of State Antony Blinken had spoken by phone with Paul Whelan, an American in prison in Russia who has been designated by the U.S. as wrongfully detained. Paul Whelan is a former U.S. Marine arrested in 2018 on espionage charges, sentenced in 2020 to 16 years in prison. He maintains his innocence. His brother David telling various news outlets that Paul and Secretary Blinken had a long, frank conversation. Taking questions today at the State Department briefing, the deputy spokesperson, Vedant Patel.
I wanted to ask you about the Secretary's call with Paul Whelan. Sure. I know the word frank has been one going around to characterize it. If you have anything to add on that.
So I can confirm that Secretary Blinken spoke with Paul Whelan yesterday on August 16th. I'm not going to get into the details of that call beyond noting that the Secretary was able to hear directly from Paul about his condition and was able to tell Paul that President Biden and he remain committed to bringing him home and are doing everything they can to do so. I will just note again that Secretary Blinken offered Russia a serious proposal for Paul Whelan's release, and that our view continues to be that Russia should immediately release Paul Whelan and Evan Gershkovich.
Paul's brother released a statement earlier today saying that the substantial proposal from 2022 has, as you all have noticed, I'm sure, dropped from State Department's messaging. You just referenced it just now, but is there another proposal perhaps in the works that Russia would be more willing to look at with different concessions, given that they haven't seriously responded to this one?
I'm just not going to get into the specifics of the ongoing discussions and negotiations around Paul's release. What I can say is that we have been clear and consistent about the need to release Paul Whelan. We did so when Secretary Blinken briefly spoke to Foreign Minister Lavrov in New Delhi on the margins of the G20 summit, when the Secretary again spoke to the G20 Foreign Ministers Ministerial. Thank you, Matt. Always here to correct us. He had the opportunity to raise this with Foreign Minister Lavrov again when he spoke to the foreign minister shortly after Evan Gershkovich's detention. And so we have been clear and consistent that the Russian Federation should immediately release Paul Whelan and Evan as well.
Just to emphasize all that, the offer that's been on the table is the offer. There isn't an updated or...
I have no updates or anything to offer on the discussions on this.
Vedant Patel is the State Department deputy spokesperson meeting with reporters today. He also condemned what he called Russia's continued attacks on Ukrainian grain infrastructure after reports of Russian drones targeting Ukrainian grain warehouses near Danube ports this week, and he also accused Russia of weaponizing food. Story from ABC News. The U.S. on Thursday sanctioned 4 Russians they say were involved in the 2020 poisoning of Alexei Navalny, the country's most well-known opposition leader. The Treasury Department said the 4 individuals were members of Russia's Federal Security Service, or FSB, the main successor agency to the Soviet Union's KGB. And from Associated Press, North Korea is increasing its repression of human rights, and people are becoming more desperate and reportedly starving in parts of the country as the economic situation worsens, the UN rights chief said Thursday. Volker Turk told the first open meeting of the UN Security Council since 2017 on North Korean human rights that in the past its people have endured periods of severe economic difficulty and repression, but currently they appear to be suffering both. That story from the Associated Press. The U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, also addressed the Security Council meeting today.
Reports indicate the DPRK continues to hold more than 80,000 individuals in political prison camps, where, according to reports, they are widely subjected to arbitrary or summary executions, torture, starvation, gender-based violence, forced abortions, and forced labor. The DPRK government has also engaged in acts of transnational repression against its own citizens and foreign nationals. The DPRK's activities abroad have included assassination, surveillance, intimidation, abduction, and forced repatriation, sometimes with the assistance of other governments, and sometimes without the consent of other governments, which shows the DPRK lack of respect for state sovereignty. Colleagues, we cannot have peace without human rights, and the DPRK is a case in point. Kim Jong-un's repressive totalitarian control of society and the systemic widespread denial of human rights and fundamental freedoms ensures the regime can expend inordinate public resources developing its unlawful WMD and ballistic missile programs without public objection. This war machine, which stands in violation of multiple Security Council resolutions, is powered by repression and cruelty. But make no mistake, the regime neglects the well-being of people in the DPRK. Its food distribution policies favors the military and lead to chronic malnourishment among its citizens. Pyongyang also relies on forced labor and the exploitation of workers domestically and overseas to power its unlawful weapons program.
Linda Thomas Greenfield, the United States ambassador to the United Nations at today's UN Security Council meeting on human rights in North Korea at the UN in New York City. The Chinese deputy ambassador to the UN, Zheng Shuang, protested the meeting even taking place. You'll hear the voice of his interpreter.
China opposes the Council's consideration of the human rights situation in the DPRK. That position is crystal clear. According to the UN Charter, the primary responsibility of the Council is the maintenance of international peace and security, not addressing human rights issues. The human rights situation in the DPRK does not pose a threat to international peace and security. At present, the international situation is fraught with change and turmoil, with crises and challenges of all kinds. The world in which we live is facing rising instability and uncertainty. The Council should focus on fulfilling its responsibility under the Charter, striving to promote the peaceful settlement of disputes, and the resolution of geopolitical confrontations, and dealing with major and urgent issues that threaten international peace and security. For some time now, the situation on the peninsula has remained tense, and confrontation has intensified. All parties should exercise calm and restraint, do more for peace and stability, and refrain from mutual provocation and escalatory words and deeds. At this complex and sensitive time, the Council should play a constructive role in resuming talk and easing tensions. Pushing the Council to consider the human rights situation in the DPRK will not only not help to ease, but escalate the situation. It is irresponsible, unconstructive, and an abuse of the Council's power. If the relevant country is really concerned about the regional peace and stability and the welfare of the people of DPRK, they should take concrete actions and make concrete proposals to promote mutual trust and resume talk. Support the adjustment of the sanctions against the DPRK, especially in the area of people's livelihoods, and immediately lift the unilateral coercive measures that have led to the deterioration of the human rights situation in the country.
Voice of the interpreter for the deputy ambassador from China to the United Nations at today's Security Council meeting at the UN in New York City, focused on human rights in North Korea. From Associated Press, Russia's deputy UN ambassador, Dmitry Polansky, whose country is an ally of North Korea, told the Council the meeting was propaganda and a cynical and hypocritical effort to step up pressure on Pyongyang. Human rights should not be discussed in the Council, he said, and attempts to link the rights situation to peace and security are absolutely artificial. And also from AP, North Korea on Tuesday denounced U.S. plans for the Council meeting as despicable, saying it was only aimed at achieving Washington's geopolitical ambitions. The Vice Foreign Minister, Kim Song-kyung, called the United States a declining power and said if the Council dealt with any country's human rights, the U.S. should be the first, as it is the anti-people empire of evils, totally depraved due to all sorts of social evils. That reporting from Associated Press. President Biden will be meeting on Friday with the leaders of Japan and South Korea at the Camp David U.S. presidential retreat in Maryland. Washington Post writes the summit reflects the way rising threats in the region, notably from China and North Korea, are drawing the United States and its two most important Asian allies steadily closer together. The Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder taking a question from a reporter about this summit.
Can you put into context why tomorrow's summit between the president and the South Korean and Japanese leaders is so historically significant from a military perspective?
Sure. So really this historic meeting really proves how important this relationship is, not only to our country, but to international security. We continue to see more and more alignment between our three nations, between the U.S., Japan, and the Republic of Korea. As recently as this June's trilateral meeting with the Secretary of Defense and his counterparts. So what we expect to see tomorrow will be significant outcomes that will cement our trilateral cooperation going forward. The deliverables that you'll see coming out of that will take that relationship to a new level, and we will continue to work together to deliver benefits for not only the peoples of our three countries, but also those in the Indo-Pacific region. And certainly don't want to get ahead of the White House in terms of what those specific outcomes will be, but I'm sure we'll have more to say afterward.
Why is this significant, and why is it happening right now? Is it a message to North Korea and China?
I think what you've seen, well, certainly it's a message to the world and to the region about how important these relationships are. I think it's a continuation of what you've seen happening in the Indo-Pacific region for a while now, which is to continue to strengthen those relationships as a way to deter potential aggression, but more importantly, to ensure stability and security in the broader region and internationally.
The Pentagon Press Secretary Pat Ryder, an Air Force Brigadier General, at the Pentagon News Conference today. The South Korean National Intelligence Service says that North Korea is reportedly preparing to test intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, and also launch a spy satellite in response to the trilateral summit at Camp David on Friday, and also joint U.S.-South Korean military exercises, which are due to start next week. And President Biden did make his way to Camp David today for that summit tomorrow. On his way there, he made a stop in Scranton, Pennsylvania, to privately pay respects to Ellen Casey, who died last week at the age of 91. She was the mother of U.S. Senator Bob Casey, Democrat of Pennsylvania, and the wife of the late Pennsylvania Governor Robert Casey, Sr., Democrat. President Biden putting out a statement earlier this week that read in part, "Growing up just a few blocks from the big Irish Catholic Casey household on Washington Avenue, I admired them from a young age. I got to know Ellen as an adult when I became a senator, and I came to respect her even more." President Biden spoke with reporters at the airport in Scranton.
I'm just going to make a brief comment about my friend Ellen Casey. You know, she, I don't know if some of you Scrantonians may have known her, but she loved with a fierceness and a tenderness that was incredible. And it was the Irish of her. She just was incredible. And I was saying earlier that my sister and I were talking about it. And my sister reminded me of a quote about Michelangelo. He said, "He saw the angel in the marble and carved till he set it free." That's what she did with everybody. I mean, she really did. If you knew her, I know this sounds like an exaggeration, but I've been coming back home since I've never left, actually. I've known the Caseys for the bulk of my life. I don't remember when I didn't know any of the Caseys. And Bobby's dad was older than me than I am older than Bobby. And we lived not far from one another. He was in Wyoming Avenue, and I lived in North Washington Avenue. We went to the same parish, St. Paul's. Anyway, she's an incredible woman, and she raised an enormously successful and decent family. All the values I learned them here in Scranton, and she was an embodiment of them. So the reason I am not going to the funeral tomorrow is everyone would have to be wanted to go in. I'd mess everything up if I went. But in addition to that, I have to meet at Camp David with 2 world leaders tomorrow morning. But in addition, I'm not going to stay at the viewing when the people are coming in. But again, they have to be wanted. I just become an impediment. I just want to show my respect to the family. So.
Can you tell us about your Hawaii trip, sir?
No, not now. I'm going to be leaving I'll be there on Monday.
Why is it important that you go?
Thank you.
Sir, on the family issue. Thank you, Mr. President.
President Biden with reporters at the airport in Scranton, Pennsylvania, before driving by his old house in the city and then going to St. Peter's Cathedral for the memorial viewing of Ellen Casey. There were a number of other tributes to Ellen Casey this week, including one from Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, Republican of Pennsylvania, who posted, "Ellen Casey was a tireless advocate for our Commonwealth, and her decades-long effort to raise awareness for breast cancer impacted the lives of countless Pennsylvania women, sending our family's love and support to Senator Bob Casey's entire family." This is Washington Today. Before we go, a couple of other headlines from ABC News. Members of the Fulton County grand jury that voted to indict former President Donald Trump on Monday are facing threats after their personal information was shared online, authorities said Thursday. The sheriff's office put out a statement saying the Fulton County Sheriff's Office is aware that personal information of members of the Fulton County grand jury is being shared on various platforms. We take this matter very seriously and are coordinating with our law enforcement partners to respond quickly to any credible threat and to ensure the safety of those individuals who carried out their civic duty. And this from The Hill. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer, Republican from Kentucky, on Thursday requested that the National Archives and Records Administration provide unredacted documents and communications from President Biden's time as vice president as part of the panel's probe into the president's son, Hunter Biden, specifically messages related to Ukraine and the Ukrainian gas company Burisma sent or received by President Biden or Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden sat on the board of Burisma at the time. And finally, from the White House, an announcement that the White House counsel, Stuart Dellery, will leave his post next month. AP writes that it is after a nearly 3-year run helping President Joe Biden weigh legal considerations as he implemented his pandemic response, battled Republican investigations, and crafted major legislation. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Subscribe to C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word to get the stories Washington is talking about, sent to your inbox every day. Sign up at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.